Hello and welcome to episode 455 of The Crate and Crowbar. It is the 10th of March 2026. My name is Chris Thurston, represented tonight by a beautiful photorealistic moth eating a pepperami, perhaps, in the future. And I'm joined by Jamie Britton, joining from the, as far as I can tell, looking at this video that you, the listener, can't see, the actual future. Hello, Jamie.
Hello. I'm in one of our recording studios at Maverick Games. It does look like I am Quincy Jones, and I'm about to take you through my sweet new sounds for the new, I guess, Michael Jackson album.
I am hoping for some sweet new sounds. I appreciate that I've kicked this off with a largely visual bit, because it has been a while, I will acknowledge, since I've recorded one of these. But just for the mind palaces of everybody listening to this, Jamie is flanked by neon purple lights in a sort of perspective warping cyberpunk pocket dimension, as far as I can tell, also known as a sound engineer's room. But nonetheless, it's probably the most professional setup I have ever seen in the 13 years-ish of doing this podcast. So congratulations.
Thank you. I mean, they didn't have to put in the customizable RGB lighting everywhere. I mean, that wasn't
Yes, they did.
I guess they did.
You need to dampen certain sounds, and you need to, I don't know...
increase the purple.
Radicalize the light. Like, you know, it's... you can actually... I believe... I have worked closely enough with audio directors to understand that they can hear things we can't. They can listen to the coolest thing you've ever heard and like scowl and look absolutely crestfallen and be like, I'm going to have to burn this. This is awful. I can hear Satan's breath in this otherwise flawless piece of audio. So they could probably hear purple, I'm guessing, and add some quality that will be apparent in some way to somebody.
Yeah.
I think
that's absolutely right. And if only I could work out how to change the lighting, because
do you think they do colours other than purple?
I think they probably do. I'm scared to go over and try, because he's away at GDC at the moment, and he will come back, and I'm a bit scared that he will be like, "Who fucked with my RGB setup?" I had it just the way I wanted it.
It's the purple that's really creating this energy. I appreciate I probably need to get off this bit for the aforementioned. It's an entirely visual thing. It's just fun to see someone in a laser dimension, all right? That's kind of where I've been spending my week as well, so which we'll get to. How are you, Jamie? How are things? It's been a while since we've done one of these.
Yes, it's been a while. We did get to meet in person over Christmas.
We did.
Nice.
Finally, you and I actually met, to much to the surprise of all of our mutual friends who are present, like Marsh, who hadn't realised that you and I had just somehow now managed to never be in the same room at the same time.
Yeah, I got real life FaceTime with you, with Tom, with Wiltshire, with Matthew Castle, who does a different podcast, but was very nice to meet. Yeah. It was excellent. I got really, really drunk. And Marsh asked me the next morning if I was okay to drive, and I said yes, but I wasn't actually sure.
Ooh. Like, I think there's a weird thing now where, since Marsh moved to the US, like I was in Bath for a really long time until last year, and yet it is often Marsh's return, like annual returns to the UK, that actually gets those of us who still live within 20 miles of each other, like back in the same room. And I appreciate, obviously, you're not Southwest based, but like the kind of shameful, really. What I'm fessing to here is that, like, just a terrible friend to Alex Wiltshire and Tom specifically. But
I like that he brings debauchery, though. Marsh being this sort of Lord of Misrule, just kind of descending.
Yeah, I mean, let's just face it, that's a man that lives in all of our heads now. I hear his voice everywhere I go. This is a bit of a sidebar, and I don't want to get too deep into it because it's not a game I was planning to talk about, but I've been playing a lot of Halfsword. It's a very me game. It's a medieval warfare physics simulator kind of thing. I probably could talk about it. I maybe will in a future episode. But it's very, very detailed in terms of its use of how weaponry interacts with the human body. It seems to have done quite well on Instagram Reels and stuff like that, or TikTok, I guess. I see them on Instagram because I'm almost 40. And because of its like dismemberment and because it's so physics based, and it is slapstick and silly in some respects, but it's also like teaches you quite a lot about how horrible it would be to be killed with a sword. You really like you don't take like 10 damage or something, like you
No.
bits come off. And I have kind of hit the top of its difficulty curve now, and the thing I like to do is load up a level which is just me in an arena with 5 peasants, and I am a shirtless man armed with a sword. And because swords are just very good if someone isn't wearing any armor, it turns out.
Yeah.
And you know, try and clear the field in as few precise cuts as possible. Anyway, there's a maneuver I believe would have revolutionized medieval warfare had it been invented at the time, which I've come to call the marsh, only because it involves very swiftly feinting upwards and then sweeping down with your sword and cutting someone's feet off. And for some reason, every time I do it, I think Marsh would love this, and then just go about my day. That's my Marsh Davies tribute for the week, I guess. Miss you, buddy, even though you're still here and just not on this particular episode of the podcast.
We were so hungover on the drive back that we stopped at a petrol station. And I asked Marsh if he wanted a coffee, and he's like, I think we need to have a little walk first. We need a little calming walk. So we went for a walk around the petrol station on the motorway, and did some psychogeography. We were saying we just going to see what there was around the back there, and then he was finally ready to have a coffee and a bacon sandwich.
It's funny because obviously doing this podcast for so long now that we've all had to get older. By necessity, that it genuinely, I appreciate, like I'm sat here with a cup of tea and a glass of water and thinking back to the days when we would drink quite heavily while recording this. I think like needing, like, I think what that at one point that output like a kind of steady decline towards kind of humorous questions section, whereas like now I think I would simply be asleep. Probably already, by this point in the podcast. But yeah, but like a sort of like weary decline towards psychogeography is probably the 60-minute video games show that would produce.
Turns out psychogeography is quite hard, and also you generally have to know stuff about what you're psychogeographizing. Like, I don't know anything about that petrol station. So when me and Marsh were round by the bins, I didn't have much to offer, really, apart from those are some bins.
I think once, I appreciate I'm just rambling now, but a couple of years ago, I think it was lockdown times, Marsh and I went for a walk, as that's the only thing you're allowed to do. And we went for a big walk outside the outskirts of Bath into a particularly flat suburb, and we both felt innately psychically uncomfortable at the same time. I don't think I've told the story on the podcast before, and I couldn't really account for it, like why I've always felt like a kind of crushing but also weirdly like agoraphobic pressure in like normal rolling sort of British suburbia. I would assume in my case that it was a sort of like I don't know what it is, but Marsh attributed it to us both being of Welsh heritage and some inherent part of us feeling deeply uncomfortable outside of Valley, like a flat. And I was like, actually, there might be something to that, because when the first time I went to Manhattan, I thought I was going to fall into the sky. Like, it's so fucking flat. Like, anyway, so he's basically, he's got an eye for liminal terror, that one. And
the term indentational trauma is now knocking around in my head like as an inherited fear of not being in a valley.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, we're short, stout folk. We were intended to yell from one hillside to another, not meet in Zencaster to talk about video games. Sorry, but yes, it's for my part, I've actually been playing quite a lot of games. It's nice to do the podcast again. It's been a fair old while. I think I have bounced back enough from my I guess post very intense game dev, then post very intense being made redundant, to kind of like arrive at a place where I'm playing games again as a player might. And I think it's always a hard mindset to shake when you've been deep in production for a really long time. And I'm still in that world in other ways, still working on stuff.
Yes, there's
But
a thing.
yeah,
There's a thing I'm sure you encountered, which was new to me, that you can get if you work in games for a while, and I've been doing it for 3 years now. You can get stressed playing games because you're
mm,
worried about how they're made.
yeah,
Like, I can't remember which game it was. It was a game. It might have even been Resident Evil, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. But like going like, oh, I've just walked into this room. Any minute now, there's going to be a trigger box where someone's going to say something. Yes, there it is, and that line's
yeah.
probably been killed on a cooldown, so we won't hear it again. And like overthinking it, and it's stressful and
It's
anxiety
hard.
provoking.
Like I think, and I guess I must have talked about this in the past over the years, but like it is like fundamentally changed like how I perceive a lot of things in games now, and there are things I really enjoy, and I don't think I'll ever. Part of it is just knowing more and being more kind of experienced in terms of like how games are designed and made and so on, which is a good thing. Part of it is being far less willing. Like genuinely, I'm not sure I'll ever come on the podcast again to talk about a game I've really disliked because like as we both know, it's a fucking miracle anything ships, and I kind of just I mean not to say that you can't be critical, but like life's too short in some ways, right? Like, and there are too many games to I think justify like dwelling on some why something doesn't work as opposed to celebrating the things that do. But I think the thing that has started to sort of fade for me a little bit. Like I'm working on some indie stuff at the moment. I've got some other things in the fire, but it's partly like I think even a year ago plus I was so hyper aware of production particularly that like I think I remember talking in the pod about like how being impressed by games like fuck this was tightly produced. Like you've really operated within your scope cap here. Like there's
Yeah.
and that like and I appreciate that is exciting. Production's a real craft. Like there is but I'm not expecting players to be excited about that, right?
No.
Like you know what I mean? Like nobody I'm not I'm going to say this, it is thankless work, but nobody like is sort of the burn down chart wasn't the deliverable to players, right? And I just said the word deliverable outside, so clearly the demon hasn't left me yet. Like this, you know.
Don't worry,
But
Chris. You haven't said stakeholders yet.
look, the only stakeholders I'm interested in is the vampire guy in Megabonk, but that's a different story. And that's what doesn't even make any sense. Why would the vampire be holding a stake anyway? Jamie, what have you been playing, and is it nice?
What I have been playing is Mewgenics, the new game from Edmund Macmillan. He of Super Meat Boy, Binding of Isaac, various other games. It's been long in development. I remember him talking about it like 12 years ago. I think it was supposed to be the game he made after Isaac, or maybe even after Super Meat Boy, and then ended up Binding of Isaac kind of took over everything. Binding of Isaac is one of my very favorite games of all time. I have plowed probably approaching 700 or 800 hours into that game. I adore it. It's brilliant and it's completely mad. And the thing I like about it is that I always kind of, in my head, I always kind of compare and contrast with Spelunky. And Spelunky, takes the roguelike structure, turns it into an action game, and does it in kind of a minimalist way. I mean, it sort of does until it doesn't, right? And Spelunky 2 kind of pivots away from that. But ultimately, with Spelunky, it's pretty simple. You've got your whip, you've got your bombs, you've got the level, you've got stuff you can do beyond that and stuff you can kind of collect. But you still, almost always, if you have an item, you have to actually hold it and do something with it, right? Isaac is a game which takes a maximalist approach. It's a game that's kind of been constantly updated and iterated upon, and it had this really interesting trajectory because one of the things that's nice about Edmund Macmillan is that he talks really openly about himself, his mistakes, his sort of philosophies on game dev. He's kind of an open book ever since kind of Indie Game the Movie, which sort of first introduced me to him. And it's always really great that he does this. And one of the mistakes he made with Isaac was kind of listening too much to streamers and kind of big personalities when it came to the game in terms of how he updated it. Because streamers and people who play Isaac for an audience, of which, Isaac owes a lot of its popularity, they often are mostly focused on more levels of challenge and more levels of difficulty so that they can sort of run that. And so Isaac kind of took a couple of steps back halfway through its dev when he kind of leaned too much on that. And then he did the brilliant thing of just hiring all the best modders and releasing this this final expansion pack, which is called Repentance, which basically doubled the size of the game. It's brilliant. It's such a fantastic ending to Isaac. It gives it the story a brilliant ending. It's wonderful, wonderful thing. And for an Isaac fan like me, it was just such a relentless treat. In terms of, and it just kind of, that game had been made for 12, 13 years, whatever. Brilliant. And so I love Isaac, I love Edmund Macmillan, and I've been really excited for Mewgenics. And it's so nice to see that Mewgenics is basically turn-based Isaac. I mean, that's kind of the long and the short of it. But to go into it a bit more, I think, in the similar way of you might contrast Isaac and Spelunky, you could quite easily contrast Into the Breach and Mewgenics. Into the Breach is a small numbers, turn-based, roguelike, run-based. But I found with Into the Breach, which is a game I really like, you really have to work hard for those synergies. There's nothing that's ever going to break the game. Those guys are so brilliant at balancing shit that you're never going to find an elite game-breaking strat. Certainly not if you're me. Maybe if you're Tom Francis, but definitely not if you're me. Mewgenics is similar to Isaac, completely maximalist, completely over the top, and is just constantly egging you on and prompting you to break it and to do something ridiculous. And it's also got that kind of huge scale. People talk about it having 200 hours worth of gameplay in it, which is kind of extraordinary for, a game made by a small group of people like that. So to give you a kind of broad outline of how the game plays, you have a bunch of cats which sort of turn up outside your door. You're in this kind of slightly Winter's Bony, poverty, trailer trash kind of world. Cats turn up, you pick 4 of them, you give them kind of character classes, and you go off on an adventure. You climb up a kind of roguelike tree. There's various worlds you go through, and you fight kind of ordinary battles, which are against various disgusting beasts and cat-like monster things. You pretty much everything in this game is a cat, I think. A cat or a maggot or a fly. There's not much variation. Well, there's lots of variation within that, but not huge amounts beyond it. And so you do turn-based action with these guys, with these cat guys. And you take you can move once, you can do a attack, and then you can do usually a special action. And then as you go through, you'll defeat enemies, defeat bosses, level up, and get new abilities or upgraded versions of your new abilities plus items. So it's all kind of pretty standard stuff for the turn-based roguelikes, of which I've played quite a few. And weirdly enough, a game this has a lot in common with is Wildermyth, if anyone's played that, which is the kind of RPG story creator, but its action level is very similar to Mewgenics. So the main draw here is, I think, those synergies, because they urge you to break shit. They urge you to kind of make mad things happen. And it's easy to kind of suddenly find yourself playing a completely ridiculous game in search of success. So, for example, on one run, I had an ability which allowed me to do my special action as many times as I liked. And the only special action I had was a roll. And sorry, it didn't make me do any special action as many times as I liked. What it did was it allowed me to do a special action, and then it would automatically repeat that, right? Now, this particular cat had a very cheap action it could do to hurt another animal, right? So all it had to do was get in range of them, and then I could more or less cause infinite damage. Now, if I'd used up my move ability, I could only use my roll. Now, I had a perk which meant that when I did a roll, I'd do another roll. Now, right. For whatever reason, the first roll I could control, the second roll I could not control. So the cat would do a very funny little doofy roll, and then it would go somewhere else. And so the game became about playing the odds of where that cat was going to roll on that second roll, right, to try and cause as much damage as possible, right? And that is that is one of the sort of the few building blocks that will make up a run in Mewgenics. There'll always be something crazy like that. There'll always be a mad thing you're doing to try and get a particular ability to pop off. I had an ability in the run I did today, which is a massive spell which damages every enemy on the whole board, and then sets everything on fire. And then it also has a terrible consequence. So your cat will get an illness after this spell pops off. And the illnesses, they've got so many in there. There's like leprosy, feline AIDS, just like crazy things. I think, yeah, loads of those things. But then I also had an ability that if my cat did a spell, it would teach every other cat that same spell. So I could set everything on fire, then another cat could do it, and then another cat could do it, but they'd all end up with illnesses, which would kind of have various buffs and debuffs. So it made it completely chaotic and mental, but really, really fun, and just this kind of huge inferno going on. So that's the kind of fun of it. It's one of those games that opens up as you go. So there's new mechanics coming in. There's sort of different gameplay modes. There's various ways, and it's one of those games where part of the joy of it is discovering the geometry of it and kind of working out what you're actually doing, because it doesn't make it clear in the game like what you're actually doing in the same way as Isaac. And I put like 25 hours into it, and I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what my goal is really. There's lots of cats, there's lots of sort of grim art, and yeah, it's lovely. It's a really great, because this is the thing with Edmund Macmillan, is that he's kind of messy and gory, and there's all poo and pee and spunk in his games everywhere, but he is a really like powerful game designer underneath all that. He's got real gas in the tank there, jizz in the tank there, and it's really nice to see a kind of because we would often sort of think about people who are very elemental with their design and very focused, but he makes chaos kind of his bread and butter, and I really appreciate that.
It's really, I mean, yeah, there's like, it's a really, I'm not sure there's necessarily an inherent connection towards the kinds of games that he has made and the aesthetic that they have, even though the aesthetic's relatively consistent in that regard. But it adds something that's the case. Like Super Meat Boy would still be like a really precise platformer if it didn't involve like being a screaming hunk of skinless meat screaming as it collides with razor blades all the time.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask is, in the case of Mewgenics, how are you finding runs most often end? And I'll kind of preface this by saying, is there a point where, like, I don't know, the combo or the kind of the mechanics that your current run is kind of centering around cease to, like, I don't know, match the challenge that's being put against you? Is it hitting a wall in that way, or is it more that I don't know, it sort of collapses in on itself in some way and you cease to be able to progress?
I think, at least so far, as soon as you start finding a synergy, that is going to carry you through, because he graduates the endings of it. So there's Act 1, which I completed in maybe 12 hours, and that is a particular kind of route through the game. And then another one opens up, Act 2 opens up, which starts in a different biome. So what's nice about it is that your goals, at least early on, feel quite modest. So you never feel too far away from a victory. It still feels really good to win a run, but it doesn't feel like because like I think the best games like this, and I think this is an example of it, like runs are going to end in kind of three ways, right? One, where you kind of luck into a really cool synergy and steamroll your way through, and that can feel great. Usually doesn't feel bad, I don't think. Usually, I think Macmillan is very good at making this feel great. Then there's the one where you don't quite get the synergy, but you kind of think through things in such a way that allows you to be successful. And then the third one is that it goes wrong and you don't manage to do either of those things and you die and you have a full wipe and stuff like that. I think, and that kind of is something that I think a lot of games contend with in the roguelike space. I think Mewgenics does a really good job at making all that fun. Like, even a full party wipe, you've never lost so much that it feels inconsequential, and you always feel like you've learned something, and you can use your dead cats as currency, which is very useful as well. There's a whole different series of weirdos who want your cats for various illicit purposes, and you can send them to him and others to kind of upgrade your runs. I think there's the Hades mirror issue, right, where I like the game Hades, but I always found the mirror that you upgrade your sort of self with a little bit, I don't know, it felt a little bit like cheating to me. I don't quite know why. It's just, I suppose I'm a bit more of a purist with roguelikes, where I like to feel like the first run is winnable. You only need the knowledge to get there. Whereas in Hades, I'm sure it's true, but I'm sure many people have done it, but like you still need to just pump points into the point mirror to make that happen. Whereas I feel like Mewgenics, it does that. You know, you're sending your cats to people and you're breeding your cats to make stronger cats. But it still feels a bit more fair, I think, in a funny kind of way.
It's interesting. It's kind of where the skill expression is. And I think, honestly, you can talk about this genre probably forever because it's, you know, in terms of this set of tensions, but with something that's like strategy or turn-based in that way, the sense, there's a thing where the skill expression is basically through your ability to recognize when you should pivot, like halfway through a run, right? Where like you might achieve something early that gets you, Balatro is a good example of this. Like you might achieve something early that will get you to the numbers you need for the first couple of thresholds, but the skill expression is recognizing where that's likely to kind of curve out and when you should be looking to like completely pivot. And that's really hard. Like that's a level of like not game knowledge and sort of like strategic decision making that I find really hard to put into practice. And often what I find is that with games like this, when I start to churn out of them is often when that's the barrier to me getting to the next level of awareness, because it's like I could learn this new, I could fully like inhale this data and try and like make sense of it, or I could do something else. And that's often quite a tricky part to overcome. And I think it's really it's compelling to hear that, because making that as fun is the key, right? Like making still failing, or even making it fun to continue to collide with that ceiling, if that's what's happening, seems to be the key.
I think I totally agree with you, and I have the same problem. Like Balatro and Slay the Spire sequel out recently. I'm sure we'll be chatting about that at some point. But like that requirement in games past a certain point to be able to pivot in your run and do something differently in order to correct a mistake, I'm terrible at. I just don't want to do it. I want to get powerful and pump more power into my power until it's even more powerful. You know, I think the thing that he does, which is genius, is that his solve on that is just chaos, right? That there'll be enough times where your run or your synergy won't be perfect enough to carry you through, but it will be entertaining and mad and disgusting. And that's part of where all the poo and pee and that kind of faintly, it's not even faintly, it is early noughties, newsground, flash animation humor, like, you know, which he was a big part of, that's where that comes in really useful, because you can use things being disgusting and things being hilarious and things being kind of over the top to kind of counter the fact that a player has failed to optimize, you know. And often that chaos can also mean that even if you fail to pivot early on, the chaos that you then kind of stumble into can come back into your kind of benefit later down the line, further on in the game. You know, it's not necessarily, oh, you failed to realize that you needed to pump up this aspect, so you're done. It's like, okay, you're going to like come by the skin of your teeth, even though it's going to be really funny because every time you do anything, a cat is going to do a poo in a random place, you know, and like finally that might come back together.
Yeah,
which I think is great. You know, that's the sort of thing that's never going to happen in Into the Breach, right?
Sure,
you have to know what you're doing.
One of your mechs is not going to do a little poo. Into the breaches, you could call it. Hey.
One thing I will say about the theming, because one of the main things people said about this game when it came out is like, oh, I don't know if I can do with all the poo poo pee pee, little naked baby cries on a poo stuff, and it is like, it's funny when you get into it, because, you know, the styling and the way the cats are portrayed, which can only sort of be described as the Andrew Lloyd Webber's crystal meth phase, you know, it's just sort of really alarming.
It's like Stephen King is most of his best work.
Absolutely, yeah. And like, you know, there's this sort of, the animations are really disgusting. You know, the way that the cats fight and claw at each other and scratch their asses across the ground, like, even though they're rudimentary cartoons, they're just real enough to be gross. You can turn off the cat breeding animations in the menu, which must be a first to have that an option. Well, I did that immediately. I was very thankful that he had included that. And, you know, there's like mad shit, like there's huge amounts of songs and singing and songs about cats, and cats singing songs. And each level, each kind of area has a theme that kind of builds. And then on the final boss fight, it will be sung. It'll be a song about this cat and what it wants to do.
That's the best thing a video game can do, incidentally.
Yeah.
Like, you ask what the best feature in a video game is, like, or like what makes something like an instant game of the year. It's the boss sings their own theme tune. Like that's it. Like, congratulations, Baldur's Gate 3, you did it. You found the secret.
Yeah, and the singing shopkeeper in Crypt of the Necrodancer is still, when you first see that, it's one of the most glorious things that's ever happened ever. So this game has that, and also like just huge amounts of those songs. Like, they've written like fucking tons and tons of them. All of them are really crazy. What's great about it is that it's just done with so much confidence and a sense of humor about itself and a sense of silliness that none of it is actually gross. None of it actually feels even the slightest bit cruel. It just feels stupid and fun. And even the bits which are kind of a little bit transgressive, there's a guy who's basically taking your dead cats so he can do horrible things to them. And I don't mean put them in an oven, but like, even that stuff is done with such a kind of devil-may-care attitude that it just feels silly and funny, and gives you kind of more motivation to just also act in a mad and stupid and scatological way. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. It's disgusting. The cats' voices are also really fun, I should mention. Like, they managed to give them a lot of personality in however they put them together. They've got various different looks that they do. They also have lots of different voices. So there's like that are kind of weirdly identifiable in like the subset that they are. So like cowboy cat, beatnik cat, cat, which is clearly a robot cat pretending to be a real cat. There's things like that which are great. And they also sing the theme tune as well when they're idling, which is double trouble. So yeah, Mewgenics. I don't know how far I'll go in it. It's got a lot of stuff in there, and I keep uncovering more. And yeah, and he'll end up updating it several times and all this sort of stuff. It'll be a forever game for a bunch of people, I think. And yeah, it's great.
You have convinced me, because I was a huge Super Meat Boy fan, and really I think I ended up reviewing Binding of Isaac when it came out. I think for PCG, maybe Edge. I can't remember, both. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. But I haven't played Mewgenics yet, so it's actually nice to know that it's out there and it's good. And yeah, that sounds great. I know, everyone should be playing Slay the Spire, and I appreciate there are probably people listening to this who are annoyed that this isn't just the Slay the Spire episode. But yeah, that sounds great.
What have you been playing?
So I've been playing loads of things. Like I say, I'm kind of back into games in a big way, as my kind of main thing I'm doing for fun. But I want to talk about one thing in particular because it's topical, but also because I've kind of surprised myself by my reaction for it, and that's Marathon. So Marathon is Bungie's new game. It came out this week, last week, depending when you listen to this, obviously. And I'll give some pretext. And actually, this is going to be a really interesting one in the light of what I said at the beginning of this episode about wanting to talk about games that I feel positively about. And this is one of them, but I want to get to that. So I had very low expectations for Marathon for a few reasons. One is, I am an avowed Bungie fan in a lot of ways. I have been for a really long time, a long time. And there's lots of dimensions of that I can point to, but the core of that really isn't that I loved Halo as a game. Actually, it was, to be honest, it was like the I Love Bees ARG around the time of Halo 2 and their storytelling and their sort of particular take on sci-fi and visual design and things. And there's always a kind of a mix with Bungie's early stuff of some slightly more traditionally video gamey cribbing from Aliens and all the rest of the things that video games do, with a kind of slightly more ambitious, or Warhammer, cribbing from Warhammer, and a slightly more ambitious, sort of slightly more highbrow kind of sci-fi sort of beneath the surface, often associated with AI and futurism and that kind of thing. And then obviously, I sort of followed that for a really long time, and I played Destiny for a full decade with very few breaks along that way. And it was tough to acknowledge last year that I had stopped playing Destiny. And I went a full year without playing it. And that was when I kind of finally logged in for the last time and uninstalled it. And that was mid last year. And there are reasons for that to do with the kind of changing nature of the game. the fact that the story kind of really came to a satisfying conclusion in a lot of ways after that 10-year mark with the final shape. But also, misgivings, right? Like, they laid off people whose work I really respect. The vibes around Destiny particularly just weren't great at the time, and I don't know how they are now, but they made a lot of choices that I didn't necessarily agree with. And I have all the physical volumes of the Destiny lore on a shelf upstairs, right? I really loved a lot of what they did with that game, and I was really, really attached to it. And I felt a bit of a sense of as a fan, I think I might be done with this now.
As a journalist, you were one of the people, giving it some of the most robust and consistent attention, right? If just to pay you a compliment there, but you were very much a part of the kind of story of that game and where it was going and all that sort of stuff.
I mean, I don't think anyone. I think it was more I paid a lot of attention to it, I guess, and I did sort of. There's lots of things I love about it still, but yeah, it was a difficult relationship, and I'm not in that camp of Destiny was ruined because the attention moved to Marathon at all. Actually, it's the scale Bungie is or has been, and the acquisitions they've gone through and things. It's not shocking that would be a 2-game studio in some way, even though they never really have been before, and that's a challenging thing. But that's not the thing. My expectations for Marathon were fairly low. I think for the partly because of my own distance from Bungie as of late, and also because honestly, and I think this is the narrative that started to prevail last year. It's a challenge to launch a slightly niche shooter in this day and age. And I think famously last year, it had its first round of sort of tests or semi-public tests around the same time as Arc Raiders, and then kind of retreated from the public eye. Arc Raiders came out, which is also an extraction shooter, and I'll talk more about Marathon specifically in a minute. And obviously blew up, did really well. I played a lot of Arc Raiders. I really, really admire it. And so I came into Marathon, its free weekend, they had a free server test weekend, with low expectations, and having, I think, ingested a lot of my own preconceptions and the kind of aura around the game generally. And I really, really bounced off it almost immediately. I had tons of sort of objections to the things that it had done and so on. And then a really weird thing happened last week where I played it for a couple of hours during the free weekend, put it down. I was like, well, I guess I'm not, this one isn't for me. I guess I'm still at a remove from Bungie and their games. And then I cannot explain this. Maybe it's as simple as marketing. I don't know. But in the week following, I started to get this little thing of I really want to try it again. And so I did something which I think is a good little hack if you're trying to find your way into something you feel like you should and don't. And this is not to kind of you shouldn't just want to change your opinion. But I find really useful is look up a beginner's guide written by someone in the community, rather than there can be really great guides provided by traditional media, but mixed in with that will be the kind of SEO chasing stuff that everyone is obligated to do when a big game launches. What you really want is often a Reddit post where someone's here's what I wish I knew, or when it's someone who, as a member of the community, wants to bring other people into something that they enjoy. Rather than having someone tell you why the game is good, having someone tell you how to enjoy it is often the way to then click that. And so I read a post, and I kind of some things clicked with me that I realized would be misconceptions, and I'll get into them. Long story short, I ended up buying the game, kind of on a bit of a Steam refunds exist if this goes south kind of thing. And now, 20 hours later, in not a very long amount of time, I think it's fucking great. And that has been such a delight. I wasn't expecting to get something kind of open up in front of me like that. I think it's really good. And it's been heartening to see, I think, opinions warming to it, the kind of preconceptions becoming more of a kind of background noise, and seeing people, I hope it goes the distance. I really do. I feel the traction seems to be there. I'm not in a position to assess that with any kind of professional credibility. But yeah, and so I really want to get into what that perspective shift was. But before I do want to, because I know you've played a little bit of it, Jamie, and I wanted to ask what your take on it was.
Well, actually, it's very interesting to hear you talk about it, because what I did was I played a few hours of the server slam, and I guess my main thoughts would be that I found it just too obscure and too like the thing I thought was like, wow, that UI that I know they slightly came to by slightly illicit means, but like that kind of sense of information overload and kind of static noise and digital noise kind of is also repeated through the gameplay, and I'm finding that too hard to push through. Like everything is too hard to read, the world is too hard to read, the guns are too hard, the systems are too hard to read, everything like that. And like it just compared so badly to Arc Raiders in my head when I was playing it, because Arc Raiders is so kind of coherent in terms of the spaces it provides you, right? It's like, oh, this is a bunker, this is some forests, it's like it's all stuff that you sort of know what it is and you know what you're doing with it, and the guns are largely like Marathon feels genuinely alien, and it's kind of for me at least, it's making me suspect hearing you talking like it's quite easy on first impressions to read that as a bug rather than a feature, perhaps.
Yeah. Yes, that is exactly how I felt. In fact, I think I remember playing the Server Slam with Paul kind of in front of Pod and basically making that exact point about the comparison with Arc Raiders. The Arc Raiders, there's loads of things I love about Arc Raiders, right? Like particularly like the sense of it feels very the world feels very physical, simulationist in the right ways. You feel like you're breaking those robots apart by destroying them as contraptions rather than whittling them down as health bars, that kind of thing. That's all really good, and it remains really good with its own challenges and strengths and weaknesses. So when I came back to Marathon, I just took it a little bit more slowly, and I listened a little bit more to what the game was trying to tell me. And I think you're right that there is a lot of potential information overload in there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do that a little bit and just sort of reintroduce the game. People haven't played it, because I think what you're referring to, that information overload, is kind of part of the aesthetic. Like the Marathon it's obviously in some ways like a spiritual successor / reboot of Bungie's first FPS, Marathon, for the Mac, but which was their Doom basically. But this is a kind of its own thing. It is about a lost human colony in the distant future in Tau Ceti, which has sort of gone dark after being sort of seeded by a colony ship, Marathon, which is built inside one of Mars's moons that they've shot off into space, which is a very Bungie set of visual kind of things. If you like a large space object, there you go. It's been a loop. It's been a ball. Now it's a ball with a USB stick stuck in. There's so many different big shapes. Anyway, and you play. And you play as a runner, which is effectively like a digitized consciousness. You presumably were human once, but you're not anymore. You're just a sort of uploaded brain that gets downloaded into cool, sexy 3D printed crash test dummies to go on raids or runs to the surface of Tau Ceti to retrieve stuff, find information, etc., etc., etc. And that's the premise for an extraction shooter. The surface itself is these sort of abandoned colony buildings that were all kind of built as prefabs. I would describe it as like QR code core, or
yeah, absolutely,
3D printer punk or something. Like it's in that it's very distinct. It's very sort of cyberpunk inflected, but with its own thing. And there are bad robots and there's other kind of threats in that environment. And the whole interface is based on this idea of, I think it's interesting to think about Arc physicalizes you in the environment, right? Like you are living in this bunker and you get in the tube and the tube shoots you into made up Italy, and then you're fighting for your life against a robot, and you're wearing your best North Face fleece. And if you're unlucky, a rascal will steal it. Like that's the sort of the energy that they can't steal your fleece.
Get off my fleece core.
Yeah, I'm playing a lot of DayZ as well, where they can steal your fleece. That's the this is the stacked kind of the layers of these games, and Marathon doesn't have that at first. Like its imagery, as I kind of gestured at the start of this pod, is kind of very shifting and sort of unnerving and very sort of Blade Runner, Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. What are you seeing, quote unquote, when your consciousness is disembodied inside the machine? I guess you're seeing a moth eating a cable, or maybe you're seeing sun rise over some sort of vague agricultural colony buildings, and then a machine screeches in your ear and digitization. It's like it's honestly, there's a sort of matrixy kind of aspect to it as well. And that aesthetic is kind of pumped through everything. Thing number one I realized was just in terms of, and I guess the meta point I'm going to make is, I feel like it's the most like sort of mature and self-contained game Bungie's made while being extremely Bungie. One of them is most of Bungie's games are secretly about charismatic AI talking to each other. Marathon is you're a charismatic AI, maybe you're an upload to consciousness. Fucking everybody's a charismatic AI. What happened on the surface? AI things, maybe some aliens. We'll see, like mysteries and stuff like that. And it is really like evocatively done. Like some of the presentation is just fucking. I mean, and obviously there is the stuff they were rightly criticized for. I think one of the artists was found to have cribbed. I can't remember. There was a lawsuit around someone's work being kind of cribbed to inform parts of the art style. There's a lot to it beyond that specific aesthetic, but that's the thing. But
I think the end of that story was that they made it right and they made reparations, and it was okay. Yeah,
but like each of the contacts you work for that you take missions from is like an AI representative for like one of Earth's remaining mega corporations or otherwise mega factions. And the first time you connect to them, they basically play you an advert, like which probably play at the beginning of their corporate training video. And they're just fucking dope. Like, you want to see a lion made of smoke and oil walk across the surface of Mars, trailing cables behind a woman whose face is a plus? You do. Yeah. Like, anyway, so there's that side of it. But that's all kind of aesthetic. I really like that aesthetic. I love the music. I think the presentation's great. The overwhelm thing is, I think, partly a matter of just dialing your eye in. Like, it's less about... And because I completely had this with the Surface Slam as well. It's less about the obfuscation being the point, because I think past a certain point it becomes a lot clearer, but it's about understanding what you actually need to focus on and what you don't need to focus on. And that applies to a lot of things. A couple of things I would say. It is an extraction shooter, and it has the option to, press a button to talk to the other runners you might encounter in the wild if you're not in a team. But it is best understood that it is a PvP game, which is interesting because I think like Ark, for example, is way more of a PvE game at heart. And I think, honestly, I could ramble a lot about the social dynamics of these games and how they shake out. But they have the scales are never quite perfectly balanced, right? Ark trends towards PvE. And what you see that, therefore, is the player population tends to arc towards PvE. And that means that
the arc of Ark arcs towards PvE.
Arcs towards Ark. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and also with Ark Raiders, I think they were genuinely quite surprised at how much cooperation there was. I think they expected a more PvP kind of game, but actually just kind of the way the kind of things fell together, it ended up being a very a game that sort of is probably at its most fun when you're hanging around with strangers and doing that sort of stuff.
That's a really interesting set of things, because there's a lot that goes into that being the case. Because what I would say is, in any game that's sort of this ilk, the balance is actually usually, it depends. Often PvP is where the balance lies, because like another player, a stranger entering your kind of play space and what you're interacting with your plans, most of the time is a complication that would be better if it went away. Like that, and that is a kind of like, there's a lot of design that goes into like, oh, can we make a kind of social deduction thing where like players work together and then someone could betray them and so on. People like, that's fun to imagine, to like add that story to it, but it's actually really hard, because what you're asking players to do, you're trying to incentivize them to accept the uncertainty of having a stranger be present and not kill them, when the game gives you the option to take a small risk, often not a huge risk, and often a risk that will get worse the longer you wait, to just remove them, kill them or whatever, and take away the uncertainty. Like that's what I imagine we'll talk about it more in a future pod, because Paul and I have been playing a lot of DayZ. That is fundamentally how DayZ works. DayZ arced in the opposite direction to Ark, where it's like, if you see another player, you're probably better off just shooting them. Like, because there's not enough, the other systems in a relatively realistic sandbox that would encourage you to take a different approach don't exist. Ark is different, and there's lots of things that go into that, including like gear scarcity and where players feel their investment is sitting and how much they want to risk and all of that, and also its own matchmaking and the way that it kind of tries to pair players of a like kind with each other. And I don't think that's a bad thing. But if you are tilted that way, then deciding to PvP is actually quite an anxious choice, because you're kind of exposing yourself to a sad person going, why? And that's not what people come to for video games, particularly not me, like cursed with empathy, like to do that. When you understand that Marathon is a PvP game, that opens up part of it. It's like you're not expecting to have like unlikely alliances in the wild. Secondly, when you realize that you are not there to shoot robots, really, at all. Like that is part of it, could be your objective sometimes. That then opens it up. And it's like, well, what is it? It's actually like a mission-based stealth game. And the loot is also secondary. Like it's like PvP is not the main point. To be honest, PvE isn't the main point. To be honest, like getting the best loot out of the map isn't the main point. The point is achieving the objective you set for yourself before you went in. Like you lock a mission in and then go do it. And that sounds like the simplest thing in the world, but it does so much to unlock this formula, because the other games that it's like is Hunt and Tarkov. And unless I have very little expertise about Tarkov particularly, but I can talk a lot about Hunt. Hunt is an incredible game, really incredible game, remains an incredible game. Is also a PvP game, right? You do not make friends in Hunt, and is also a stealth game. However, Hunt pushes towards a confrontation with the boss, right? So PvE is ultimately the destination of a Hunt, and it's competitive PvE in the case that you want to be the ones to either kill the boss and extract with the bounty, or kill the people who did and get extract with the bounty. In Marathon, you drop into a map, either in a team of up to 3 or on your own. I've been playing a lot solo, and you have an objective to do that you have set before you begin. And often, the way those objectives are designed, they're quite elegant. It's quite rare to find an objective that will require you to successfully exfiltrate from the map to have achieved it, because you're a disposable 3D printed body, right? You can hack the right terminal or save the right data and die. And your mission was complete, both fictionally and otherwise, right? Like that's something that the fantasy of Ark doesn't really support, but the idea of like 3D printing a robo person to go do a mission does support that fictionally and otherwise. And then when you know that, you realize that like there isn't like a kind of holy grail at the center of the map that everyone wants, or a best item on the map that it would be a shame to miss out on. That you are there to achieve your own self-set objectives and get out, that it really starts to shine, because that narrows what you feel like you should focus on, right? Like you can rifle through some bins and like see if you find some items that you're looking for or find something good, but all of that is a risk that you're balancing against, did I get my objective done? And playing it like this, it turns into a really tense and really well-designed like multiplayer stealth action game, basically. And honestly, I am finding I have far more desire to go back and play again than I do with similar games. I don't find it as exhausting, because I'm taking little objectives on one at a time, and sometimes I die and it's okay. You know, it's generous enough with free gear, but I also don't care quite as much about losing my gear, because the loot is good. It's attractive, but it's not the be-all and end-all. It's not like in Ark, where I really fear taking out the stuff that I value the most and just getting killed. And anyways, and like every, like, I'll tell an example just because I think it'd be helpful. I played a round right before recording this, just to kind of like duck in, and partly because I wanted to test my own theory that like, am I just sort of like in love with this because there is going to be the Bungie fan that kind of emerges when there's a new one? Is it just the aesthetic and stuff? But I played around on the second map, which is called Dire Marsh. We literally cannot escape him. Which was to hack a terminal in one building and then hack 3 exposed terminals in a different part of the map. And I don't need to do all of them in one run, but obviously it'd be great to do that. Where I spawn is random. So that gives me our first thing, is like, I need to pick my way across this sort of rainy, like agricultural agri-farm and get to this particular building. I do that. I have like a brief, I recognize there are turrets on the way, and the placement of the AI can be kind of uncertain, but I'm basically crawling everywhere, just crouch walking around. I'm planning a route across this landscape. My character the character I play, the thief, has like a grapple line. to kind of get onto a roof. And I'm not doing this to kind of like sprint towards where the mission objective is. It's like I'm just planning a path, as I would in like in a thief game, frankly, like pointedly. And as I get closer, I hear a few shots, and I see what I think is two players, but I can also hear the sound of the AI robots alerted, which gives me a picture, which is there are players fighting the AI and each other in this place. I stay on the roof, and I just listen, and I listen for the last of the AI to die. And then I can hear footsteps in the building beneath me, and eventually there's some shooting, there's some chaos, and I take advantage of that to drop through a ceiling hatch down the ladder into a room in this laboratory, which also happens to be where my mission objective is. As that happens, I see a player die, and then I shoot the other player, and they're both downed, and I finish both of them. And I have and it's like I've kind of like that little breach is like they got unlucky, but also I played it right to that extent.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I get my objective, then I go to the other part of the map where I accidentally get aggro some robots, and I have to kind of fight my way out of this really tense thing. Like, your shields and health don't regenerate by themselves. You've got to use consumables for that. So you're kind of managing these resources. And then I see coming through the ground this kind of like golden pulse of light, which means that another player playing as the recon class has used their ult. Another thing about Marathon is you have these classes that have like, Q, E, and R abilities, kind of, or Q, E, and F. But it's not a hero shooter, which is one of the other major kind of misconceptions. It's not like you do have like a longer cooldown ability than the others, and I just referred to it as an ult, but it's really not. It's not that sort of like locked play style rotation thing that games of this kind sometimes do. Anyway, the recon one has a one cooldown ult that causes them to kind of like emit a pulse that pings or like gives them ping markers for every enemy in a radius around them. The downside of it is the pulse is visible. So I can see that they've done that. So I know there's a player downstairs in that building, and I know where they are, and I know they've pinged me. And so then I have all the information I need to back off and like kind of try and use that information against them by like making noise in one place. And then eventually I hear them get into a fight with the same robots that ambushed me, and then do the same thing, wait for them to kind of, and I didn't need to kill this one. Crucially, I did not need to kill this one, except they knew I existed at this point. I killed them, and at this point I've done my mission. I've got a couple of kills. I've got a full inventory, so I don't need to stick around. But there's a map event, which is this cool like space anomaly has spawned in one part of the map. Someone has grabbed it and is taking it to another randomized point to decrypt into a big fancy piece of loot, basically. And it's like, I'm pretty sure I had seen that player earlier running in the opposite direction and left them alone. And now it's like, I could extract, but it doesn't matter if I die at this point. My mission is done. I have good loot, but nothing I'm afraid to lose. Let's see what we can do. And the thief's ult is a butterfly drone called a pickpocket drone that steals people's shit. So I fly it through the vents into the building where this person's decrypting their special space anomaly. And then as they pick it up, I zap it out of their inventory with the drone. But I have to be there to pick it up, which I'm not. So they turn around and panic. And in panicking, run out of the building, kind of directly into where I'm hiding. I chase them for a bit, but don't manage to kill them, and then I lose them in a swamp. And there's 5 minutes left on the map, and there are 2 extraction points left. And I spend the rest of the map waiting for one of them to fire, like to see where they're trying to get out. Except my opponent knows that they're being hunted now, and this story is not going to have like an incredible ending because I waited until 1 minute to go before the timer ran out, and saw no hide or hair of them. My drone came off cooldown a few times, and I went looking for them. And I heard some shooting, but not a lot. And then eventually I extracted without seeing if that player made it out. And they could have died somewhere in the swamp or not. But then there was that moment where I cut my losses, extracted, but with a full inventory, having achieved my mission, loads of kills, and so on. And that, I want to stress, like, even though that was maybe anticlimactic, that was 1 20-minute session. And I've had obviously them end a lot sooner, but it's not untypical. And that whole arc, I need to stop saying that word, was so much sort of, I felt so much sort of agency, more agency on my part and more interesting choices to make more frequently than I have found with most games of this kind. And that's what really impresses me about it.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, it's really interesting to hear you talk about it. You know, at no point, was I thinking that this game, involved kind of being stealthy. I guess I thought that was because it was Bungie, and because Arc Raiders is so much about being stealthy, really, and Bungie are about loud guns that shoot people in the head. It hadn't occurred to me that would be a way, something that they would pivot towards. But of course, it makes sense for them to try, not to repeat themselves necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, obviously in 3v3 PvP, it can also be a game of like team fights and deathmatch. And actually, the gunplay really feels very Halo-y. It actually feels more like Halo than Destiny.
Yeah, because the thing is with Destiny, right, is that like even if you don't care for any of the lore or theming or anything like that, the guns just feel amazing. The guns are pretty peerless in how they feel, and that is what draws you in, right? And it feels like the little bit of shooting I did in this game, yeah, it felt more kind of Iron Sights, Halo 2 kind of vibes.
Yeah, it still feels great. Like they have made landing a headshot on a robot or an alien feel extraordinary again. But what I would say, and actually that kind of brings me to the final thing I say about this, and I appreciate like this. There's probably people who've listened to the pod for a long time, like rolling their eyes that like Chris has found another shooter by Bungie to think about. But here's what I'd say, and I think this is kind of maybe can ladder up into even some of the things you were saying about Mewgenics. So the thing that Bungie design wise the same as for way back when is like the idea of the 30 seconds of fun, right? Like that original core loop of Halo, like that every the simple beat by beat of those combat encounters being enough to sustain your interest because that sandbox is so robust and so capable of, uh, within itself generating that 30-second loop. And often, game design is about loops. And I don't want to be, I don't want to be prescriptive there, right? Like there's lots of things a game can be, but to my mind, it's healthy to think about game design as like the creation of stable loops, right? And like it's often easy to get drawn into kind of and recognizing, and this might be a bit too abstract, but recognizing what it means to genuinely finish a loop, have a loop that genuinely ends and doesn't just sort of tail off into some other set of systems at some point. It's hard to close loops. It really is hard to close loops past that like 30-second mark. I would argue that one of the reasons for the rise of like the roguelike or the run-based game in the last decade is because that recalls something back to games that was kind of lost with the advent of the save button, which is the self-closing loop. Like you died and the game is over is a really healthy way to tell the player, maybe try it again, rather than being on a kind of treadmill that kind of just kind of spirals outward and outward and outward and outward until the campaign is over or the big open world map is exhausted.
And being someone who would like check in with Destiny every now and again, and sometimes you check in with it and the community will be like, this is great, this is the best Destiny's ever been, we're having a great time. Or you check in 6 months later and everyone's like, this is shit, what are we doing? We hate this so much. And that's because of how well they're creating those loops, right? If it feels like a stupid version of that loop, they're not having fun.
Yeah, well, it's like, and I think this is the thing you can identify. Bungie, that call, like that, like 30-second loop, always been very strong. The 10-minute, the minute loop, or the 5-minute loop, or the 10-minute loop, or the half-hour loop, whatever that is, always a little bit more questionable. Great in Halo multiplayer, deathmatch has never had this problem, right? No good deathmatch game has ever had that problem because it creates its own loop in that sense. So it's a very, the match is a kind of contained environment to kind of orchestrate that. As a campaign might be, right? Like a 6 to 8 hour FPS campaign doesn't need to kind of somehow keep building past that point. But Destiny is a really interesting example of them. They always knew what the core loop was. They always had the core combat loop down. They played with it. They made maybe some little missteps. Sometimes basically that remained strong forever. But the story of that game is the story of that, whatever that meta 30-minute, 1 hour, 5 hour, week, month loop being constantly rewritten and changed and rebooted and tried and relaunched. And I think it's because it never quite stabilized. And by stabilized, I mean it never quite became sustainable. Like it will retain a player population if you don't fuck with it, right? And this is what I think, which is what makes sense of their pivot from an MMO to an extraction shooter, because that map setup, that like playing a map and seeing what happens, elegantly woven into some meta stuff, but with the right amount of like stakes there, is I think the most mature macro loop I've seen that they have built. Right, like it really shows the benefit of having made Destiny, because that is like, you know, the sort of splurge of macro loops within systems and engagement and retention and blah, and you know, and currencies and blah, and maybe Marathon will end up there. Maybe this is the months of its kind of like elegant beginning, but I hope it stays with this, because it is easier. It's easier to give players meaningful experiences within that slightly more constrained environment where stakes can rise and fall. Crucially, where you can lose gear as well as gain it, where you are not like, I don't know, I could ramble about this forever, and I appreciate I've been talking about the game for ages already, but it's like, in this light, it makes sense for them to take Halo and give it some entropy, basically. And similarly, it makes sense for them to take that core loop and make what's interesting about it, like, well, how much do you want to fight versus sneak? Or how much do you want to place your faith in your twitch skill or your strategic skill, to kind of like give the players a bit more agency over whether to really slow the game down or speed it back up again with associated risks, rather than having that be a decision that lies with the game designer as they design encounters. That, I don't know, I appreciate I've gone quite like heady about it there, but that's where it started to really open up for me. And now I'm in this position where it's like, man, I think they have made the most. I don't think I wouldn't say it's like a competitor with Hunt, really, because they're such different games. But I think it is like a really interesting peer to Hunt in a lot of ways. And I would say and Tarkov as well, although that's the game admittedly I know far less about. And it's really lovely to have something slide into that space while also looking as distinctive as it does, and like kind of having its own thing. Like it's yeah. I will stop rambling about Marathon, and I will say it's definitely also not for everybody. Like, it's definitely an acquired taste visually and mechanically. But I also would like to celebrate, like, there's a fine line between releasing a niche shooter that is destined to only reach a certain player count that might not be sustainable for the long-term health of the studio, and making something with enough of its own identity to have flavor, basically. And like, for me, Marathon falls on the positive side.
And I think that's really fascinating. And I think, you know, rather than making a hero shooter, which probably would have been the safe thing for Bungie to do, and they could have made Marathon that, to do an extraction shooter and to try and lean into the stuff that Destiny didn't do well, you know. You could never, no one could ever be best at Destiny, right? It was just like, it's a game that sort of levels things out kind of by design.
But also it kind of needs to avoid stabilizing, which is kind of the double bind, right? Where it's like, you've got to keep chasing, but you can't ever be too asymmetrical. I think one of the other interesting things is, the way I would put it is, and honestly, again, subject I find very interesting, hope it remains interesting, is ultimately what we're talking about is deathmatch with a story, right?
Yeah.
Like, because what we're talking about is the fact that, like, you know, honestly, like, sort of, I don't know, free-for-all Halo deathmatch is, I'm not going to say a perfected form. Like, it's not to say that new games can't come out and be good in that genre, but we know how to do that, right? Like, there's, I mean, the kind of global humanity has sort of solved that problem.
Yeah.
And I would argue that in the heart of a lot of these games is the desire to capture or kind of rekindle the sense of possibility that came with earlier experiences, slightly more naive experiences of multiplayer. Like, what if we teamed up? Or what if like our encounters with one another could be kind of like asymmetric in the sense of like how we want to try and like beat each other, rather than everything kind of laddering towards like optimized play patterns. You know, think about my own early experiences with like you know, early Team Fortress Classic CTF servers were basically also role-playing games, because, you know, the engineers are playing their own game, building turrets, and the spies are playing their own game, knifing each other in the sewers and stuff like that. And obviously, eventually, like any competitive environment like that, particularly a small one, arcs towards. I need to stop saying the word arc. But what I'm saying is, much like nature will keep inventing the crab, like competitive shooters will keep inventing Counter-Strike. That's basically my take on that. And that's amazing. But what it loses is like the kind of self-expression thing and some of the narrative aspects of that, like the kind of chance, right? Like the happenstance of an encounter in the wild. And I think a lot of subsequent games are an attempt to recapture that in various ways, and do so successfully in other ways. But Destiny can't really do that. Destiny is literally deathmatch for the story in that it has a deathmatch mode and a story mode, right? But that is solving the problem with sheer content, right? And that was often the game's Achilles heel. Is like, how do we even support this much content? How do we account for the amount of gigabytes the client now is? Like all of these really practical things that you don't want players to have to worry about, but inevitably they do have to. Whereas Arathin is a much more elegant, like, here is Halo Deathmatch with a story, right? Like, by the time that fight breaks out, you will have a sense of, like, stakes and location, and they'll be specific to why you're fighting these people in this place at this time. And that won't necessarily be to everyone's taste, because it does mean you could be crawling around telling you the story, tell us a story about how you are the kind of master cyber thief, only to get shot in the back by someone you didn't see, dropping out of the ceiling like a dickhead.
Because the Destiny way to sort of justify a Halo shooter in its world would be to have a loud man shouting about it constantly while you played.
I will not hear any shade on the loud man from Destiny. It's one of the best loud men, and that's, and I will say, Marathon is very vibey. It would not fit it to have the loud man, but the absence of the loud man is like, it is felt. Like one day maybe it'll end up with its loud man mode. It doesn't have it, but yeah.
I like the guy in Gambit who used to say, "You just bagged a whole bunch of motes of light. I hope you're proud of yourself. I know I am." And just like, oh, Gambit, shouty man, you shouldn't say stuff
the Drifter.
Like that.
Yeah,
the Drifter.
The Drifter. Like off, whole ass character got a romance arc in the end. Like like there's don't make me get the Grimoire volumes down from upstairs. There's a whole. But yeah, at the moment, Marathon is in this far more like gestural, like state. But it's dead cool. Anyway, I've spoken for like an hour about it. It's dead cool.
That's good.
I think it's good. I think it's good actually.
Marathon is good actually.
And
I will add on just to say, like, Arc Raiders, just because of what you were talking about with that kind of experiential thing. Like, I occasionally have moments in games, which it's happened a couple of times, and almost always with online type games, where I have a moment which is so good that I stop playing entirely because it's just made me so happy. I had one I probably talked about on the pod before because it's one of the best things I've ever done in a video game. It was on like my 12th game of Rainbow Six Siege. I was the last person alive. I was in my little bunker room right at the center of the map. There was one other player on the other team left. Everyone was watching me, obviously, because everyone else was dead. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know how to play the game. That game was fucking complicated and that game was mad. And the other player shot a hole through one of the barricades, and on instinct, I popped a grenade through that hole and went bang, and he died, and we won the game, right? And it was so orgasmically brilliant and wonderful that I'm like, I never need to play this game ever again. That was just too good. And I had a similar one with Arc Raiders where I was playing one of the maps on its like night mode, extreme night mode, whatever. And it was me and a random guy who I'd sort of teamed up with. And we were in a very dark warehouse type thing. And there were loads of players around because we'd seen them. And I was being very conscious not to turn my flashlight on because I knew that it would light us up like a beacon if I did. At one point in there, I did turn my flashlight on and I quickly turned it off again. And then as we came out of that building, 2 players ambushed us, killed us, took all our shit, and it was game over, right? It was so good because they had clearly been there for a long time. I don't know if they saw my flashlight and that's why they came over, or whether they saw us come in. But that uncertainty and that like glorious feeling of being hunted expertly was just fabulous. It was so good. I lost so much great loot. I did not think that was going to happen. And it was just I've had experiences like that in games. I never had one that was quite so emergently cinematic, and that was just kind of glorious.
My Arc peak, even though I think it is a great game, but my Arc, and it's probably not my actual peak, but it's also like I recognized at the time, like I'm never doing this again, was working to get the grapple line hook and hold on to it, then getting the very damaging landmine, then waiting till Paul was online and we were playing together, not telling him what I was going to do.
Yeah.
Going to the top of a multi-story car park, grappling onto the back of the big flying robot drone, going like, Paul, look at this, planting a landmine on its back, jumping in slow motion, it felt like, from the top of the robot back to the roof of the multi-story car park, and then him going, what, and just like looking at it, and then it detonating in the air, and showering rare loot on the ground below it. And then crucially, and this is crucial, you haven't had a good moment in an extraction game if this specific thing doesn't happen. An Eastern European man, a stranger, coming over to me and going, that was sick, bro. And that
yeah.
That's it. It's like, we're done. I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I haven't quite had that full moment in Marathon yet, but also crucially, I don't have the angst of like, this is my only mine and my only grapple hook. If I fuck this up, I'm going to look like a dickhead.
Yeah, it's really good for stuff like that. I'd say my second game, I think it might be my first actual game of Raiders on an actual map, where I was playing solo and I was just walking along, not quite sure what the game was yet, and a giant fucking robot spider jumps from what felt like 30 miles away and landed right next to me. I could only respond by going, Jesus fucking Christ! You know, it was just like, I had no idea that was going to happen, and it was lovely to be quite so surprised and terrified. It's great.
Speaking of being shit up by a surprising jumpy guy, do you want to talk about what else you've been playing?
Yeah, I've been playing Resident Evil Requiem, which is Resident Evil 9. For some reason, this is one of the ones without numbers. They did Village last time, and now they're doing Requiem.
But they managed to hide the number 8 in Village, didn't they? Like in the V and the I and the LL.
Yeah. Using like, the clever use of
which is
Roman
harder
numerals.
to do with Requiem. I guess they could have got an X in there somewhere.
Can you guess how the concept of Requiem is represented in the game?
Organ music.
It would be good if that was the case. No, it's just the name of one of Leon's big guns. It's called the Requiem. So there you go. It's not thematic at all, it's just the name of his gun. So yeah, it's weird. Leon Kennedy is a character I have spent so much time with over my gaming career, you know. Resident Evil 2 was obviously the kind of peak of graphics and kind of play at the time. If you were around for it, it was sort of a huge thing. Probably the, you know, on the PlayStation, the kind of best looking, best feeling game you could play. Brilliant game. And then the Resident Evil 4, obviously, which I play through probably once a year, and is, I think, maybe, it's hardly, you know, completely mad to say so, but easily one of the best games of all time, and still is. Yeah. And that's it, right? That's actually the only 2 games he's been in, and the remakes.
I think he's in 6.
Yes, he's in 6 as well.
There's the mad one, which is like the sort of Avengers Endgame Resident Evil.
Yes,
no one really should play, I think. But
I couldn't get through 6, but yes, you're right. Leon is in that. He's in this game as sort of pushing 50 Leon, old Leon. But yeah, I realized I'm doing that thing where I was like, I've always just sort of assumed at the back of my head that he is a Kennedy of like the Kennedys. Like,
I never considered that.
Yeah, I think he must be. I think he's like, you know, he's like there at Christmas dinner with Robert F. Kennedy talking about vaccines, and he's like, oh, you don't even know what you're talking about.
I don't want to completely spin out here, but there has never been a human being on Earth who. Actually, something just clicked into place for me, which is if you watch fucking any Robert F. Kennedy thing and understand that he is in a Resident Evil cutscene, it makes way more fucking sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like kind of go, yeah, man, that is a man who should only be experienced through the medium of like Left Behind voice memos.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
I told them not to take the vaccine.
I told them not to take the vaccine. Now everyone's sick.
No one's eating liver no more. Yeah, Jesus, he really is a Resident Evil antagonist. Yeah. He's like seconds away from mutating a massive eyeball on his shoulder. And
if he didn't put out quite so many like bizarre shirtless videos, you could assume it. Or maybe that's why he does it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Man's out there getting ChatGPT to generate him some shirtless videos to convince us that he isn't the tyrant. Like.
Robert S. Kennedy's nemesis tentacle.
Yeah. Yeah, Jesus. God, I can't stop thinking
Anyway,
about that. But thank God Leon's around, like
thank God
voice of
Leon's
reason.
around, yeah. He would put him out of his misery, no problem. Yeah, so I don't feel anything towards Leon Kennedy. He's interesting as a character because there really is nothing to him whatsoever. He is just a man with guns. And that's fine.
Now that I think about it, you've really, sorry, I don't want to keep dragging you back, but you've really unlocked something here, which is that, like, why? Because the question you may have asked yourself prior to this fucking revelation, this Resident Evil revelation,
this Resident Evil Revelations 2,
is that why would the president send one man to kick the shit out of a lot of Spanish villagers to save his daughter? Like, why not send more people? And it's like, no, we have to send the forgotten scion of America's maddest family.
Absolutely. Yeah. Deary me, I'm making too many.
It's honestly this thing goes all the way,
all the way to the bottom,
all the way to the White House in one direction and the tiny Napoleon in the other.
I know there's people listening who know that one of the Resident Evil games does start in the White House. I think it might be Resident Evil 6. So yeah, you play as Leon Kennedy, a man who is never above having travelled through a massive underground labyrinth in search of an underground science base, is presented with an enormous door with the Umbrella Corporation sign on it and goes, "This must be the place." yeah, it probably is, Leon. It's probably the place.
Probably them again, isn't
it? You found it, Leon. Good boy. So yeah, in this game you play as him. And when you're playing as him, you are a murder machine, and boy, does that murdering feel good. He's just so much fun to play. You kind of, you fire off a couple of headshots, which are sort of all animated perfectly. You shove someone over a wall. You get your hatchet out and cut someone's leg off. You pop another head with a shotgun. Then you shoot the guy whose leg you chopped off with a shotgun, and it goes into a special, like, execution animation where he, like, punches the guy with his shotgun and it explodes. And then you do, like, squash another guy's head against the wall and then pull out a machine gun. It's just like you are just a godless killing machine with no soul, and it feels so good, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of one half of the game. The other half of the game is you play as Grace, who is a blonde lady with expensive-looking hair, who is captured. And when you play as her, you largely play in first person. You can play in third person, and you can also play Leon in first person. I did a second run through this game and I played as her in third person, but when she runs, she does like a comic anime female character, like weird wavy run, which just looks completely mad, so I had to turn it off.
Make Leon do the run, you cowards.
Yeah, absolutely. He barely, he doesn't lift his heels off the ground.
Someone did a really good video of a mod for the Resi 4 remake where they just swapped Leon and Ashley's run animations, and it's fucking incredible. It's fucking incredible. Because of all of Leon, the petite blonde woman that Leon Kennedy has, associated with in games, they both have that problem, right? Of running
it's very strange. So in her gameplay, largely, you are doing like more Resident Evil 7 style survival horror.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that those sections of the game are fucking brilliant. So the kind of start of the game where you're playing as her, probably the longest single stretch of the game is you're in this horrible hospital and you just got to do Resident Evil survival horror stuff, right? yeah. And you got to do Resident Evil survival horror stuff. So going and getting a key, taking it into another room, unlocking a thing, doing a puzzle, which somehow I find incredibly difficult, despite the solution being like match 3 orange things or whatever. But it's just really glorious little sandbox space. They continue that thing from Resident Evil 2 Remake, which I really like, which is you end up getting such a good sense of the space and which specific zombies are in which room. You end up having quite a personal and intimate relationship with some of them because you're so disempowered. You've only got a couple of bullets. you can't really kill many of them at the start, and so you're like, oh, I don't want to go in that room because that's the room with the lady in the maid's outfit with one leg, who I did shoot in the leg, but it didn't put her down. Or like, I don't want to go upstairs because there's that big fat lad up there, and he's really horrible. And so I ended up having this really wonderful experience of it where, you know, every single time I was like, okay, I've got this key item, I need to take it to this place, going like, oh no, but like the crazy doorman's there with the, you know, horrible hand, and just kind of even coming up with little nicknames for these things. And they also have a mechanic which is a bit like if you played the Resident Evil 1 remake, the Crimson Head thing, where if you leave zombies around, there's a chance that they will go all horrible and have a big blistery head and get up and turn into super zombies, right? Which I was completely incapable of putting down as Grace. It was a complete emergency whenever it happened. And the whole thing is done so beautifully. Again, the gore and the jump scares of this game, my God, they're so clever at them. You know, they're really, really good at that thing that you're always kind of expecting in Resident Evil game, where you're like, right, I've just changed something, or it's just making me walk back down this corridor and lulling me into a false sense of security. And it does an amazing job of fucking with you in terms of making you expect a scare, not giving you one, and then giving you two in a row soon afterwards. And it was just absolutely putting the willies up me in such a glorious way. I can't remember the last time I was so entertained by a series of jump scares, because they're just masterful at how you're you know, how they're timed and how they're put together. And I played this game on the Nintendo Switch 2, which really revelatory, Resident Evil revelatory for playing a scary horror game on it, because I don't know if you do this, Chris, I'm a bit of a wimp, so when I'm watching scary movies, I will often look away from the screen or look at the corner of the screen or whatever. With the Switch, you can just tilt it away from your face while the scary thing happens, and then tilt it back again once the scary thing is finished happening. And that is just great, fantastic. Like, that made it much more playable.
That's a pro tip. I am a corner of the screen looker-atter for a film, I will say.
My friend told me to do that at the beginning of the Dawn of the Dead remake, which he'd seen and made me go back and watch with him. And he said to me, if it gets too scary, just look at the bottom right corner of the screen. That's what I do. And read it, I did, because that film is scary.
Yeah, sometimes films be like that.
Yeah, they do be. So yeah, that's her storyline, and that's great. And there's lots of fantastic set pieces where you're being chased by horrible monsters. And yeah, really enjoyed that. I think the second half of the game is largely Leon based. And it's here where the game just kind of really just starts showing off to an enormous degree. There is set piece after set piece after set piece, so much that is memorable and brilliant and unique. And, you know, there's even a kind of little open world section towards the end, which is a little bit kind of extraction shooter coded, actually, in a funny kind of way, just in the sort of way that you're sort of making sort of various ingresses into sort of various areas and then coming back. And it's just got that thing of everything has a clever idea attached to it. Everything has a new concept that you have to grapple with, while still allowing you to be Leon Kennedy, just insanely powerful, murdering and killing and butchering and slashing as you go. He's history's greatest monster. And then, like a final sequence, just to avoid spoilers, like if you've played a Resident Evil game, you know the kind of biome that these games end up in. Mm-hmm. And that section is where a lot of the kind of story comes into play. And as often is the case with Resident Evil, the story, if thought about for more than 20 seconds, is deeply stupid and entirely nonsensical and mad. And there's this weird, like, point in the ethereal void of ideas where Resident Evil, I'm touching my fingers together slowly for the people at home, but like where Resident Evil and Metal Gear Solid become one and the same, right? Yes. Which is where they're just talking about like global bollocks. That's no better. It's just like,
but well, this is why it's so revelatory to think of certain populist figures now as NPCs from any of those. Like honest to God, there's a parallel universe where like fucking Jordan Peterson is a Hideo Kojima character called Only Beefman. And he appears for 45 minutes at a time in Death Stranding to tell Norman Reedus to clean his room and then wheeze beefully into a like a
Yeah.
into a, I don't know, the
on my beach
butcher's
it's
napkin that is part of his whole ensemble.
On my beach it's only beef.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's like a secret ending where you poison his beef. Like that's
who poisoned my beef?
I can't do the voice because I always end up Kermit.
Well, he is Kermit, isn't he?
No, that's a
slur.
Yeah. Kermit was here first.
So yeah. Anyway,
why
the story is stupid. There is a moment in this game where there's a big character reveal, and I was like, "Oh my god, I know that silhouette. I know who that character is, making their first appearance in the series since blah blah blah. Oh my god, it's that guy. It's not that guy. It's just a guy who really looks like him."
So actually, I was going to ask: is this in continuity with the new games, which like slowly reintroduced like your Chris Redfields and so on, or is it like
they're doing a weird thing because it is the 9th Resident Evil game, but it takes place in the canon of the 2 and 4 remakes. Now, they haven't made 5 or 6 yet. I don't know what they're going to do with 5.
Yeah, or 6.
Or 6, to be honest. But it is a bit weird because unless you've been really paying attention, the canon of it doesn't make sense at all. I mean, the games already didn't make sense, but the fact that there's this weird pincer movement happening where they're retconning sort of into the center whilst extending outwards is weird. It's very strange.
It feels a little bit like the arc of Daniel Craig James Bond, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, we're going to reboot this. Oh, it's the 50th anniversary. Let's sort of fuck it up by establishing that somehow Moonraker was actually in canon, like, or something. You know what I mean? It is like, it's that situation. You know? Like,
well, I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing about those movies that always made me laugh is that, like, how furious James Bond was in those early Daniel Craig ones at people assuming he was James Bond.
Mm-hmm.
They'd be like, here's your vodka martini, shaken not stirred. He's like, what do you think I am? Some sort of bastard.
And then it, like it just
you're gonna drive your Aston Martin? I don't drive a fucking Aston Martin. What do you fucking think I am?
Yeah.
And then 5 films later, he's fully campaigning it up. Yeah, so the story of Resident Evil 9 is very, very silly. Doesn't really make sense. And it involves one of those plans where you're like, what? Why did any of this happen? But it is just such a supremely confident and relentlessly entertaining and violent nightmare that it doesn't matter. There was one moment I was playing on my Switch, as they say, and I'd just beaten a boss, and I'd just like you to speculate now, Chris. Usually this is a mid-game boss, this isn't the last boss, but there is a certain thing that happens when you land a killing shot on a boss in a Resident Evil type game. Would you dare to take a guess at what that thing was? The reason I'm asking is my partner then came into the room and looked over my shoulder at what I was doing.
Did a wiggly tentacle come out of their shattered neck stump?
Yes, pretty much, yep.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple more shots, and then they melted into a big pile of slime
eyes.
On the ground. Yeah, eyes. Yeah, there's lots of eyes. And she was just like, what the fuck are you playing? And it's so easy to get lost in the fact that I played a bunch of these games that, like, the level of violence and mad body horror on show is just amazing. It's incredible. There's all of these horrendous screams and just things bursting and pustules and stuff. That it's really like the fact that people have spent years of their life like making and rendering these things is really quite extraordinary. So yeah, I loved it. I played it through twice. My first run took me 10 hours, and then my second run, using all of my elite speedrunning strats, took me 9 hours. So
that's a humane length for a game.
Yeah, it's really solid, and like it's expensive. I always going on what it costs on this podcast. 65 quid it cost me, but like it's one of those games that feels worth every penny because it's so relentlessly entertaining and it's replayable. I mean, they've got that stupid thing they do, like earn points to kind of get the infinite rocket launch or whatever, but the game is just replayable by the fact that it's incredibly entertaining and sort of.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's great.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been meaning to. I think the price did actually put me off, so it's worth bringing up, like as a sort of point of entry. And I do need to finish Silent Hill at some point, given I think it's been a long time that's gone a bit fallow for me. But
It's funny, isn't it? You sometimes feel it's. What was the other example I had of this recently? There was a game I played. Oh, it was playing the information game. Me and Marsh talked about it, like the one that Inkle did, TR49 or whatever it's called, where like that was like 13 quid, and it felt like exactly 13 quid's worth of game. You know, it's just so funny. I find how you end up ascribing value to these things in a faintly arbitrary way, but. Yeah, there you go. It's very
my real cat has now entered the room, and
he's doing
the thing he does now, where he tells me that it is bedtime.
Oh, bedtime cat. He told you to go to bed.
No, that's my keyboard. That's my microphone. All right, this this may be the signal that this is the. Do you want to do the outro, Potato? Hey,
I've just got to say that in Mewgenics related rules, Mewgenics related news, there is one skill called Russian short hair roulette, which is the cat has will flip a coin and then it has a 1 in 6 chance to just die immediately, or it will get a stat boost, which is very funny.
I have to say, as now a cat person, I do not wish any harm upon any cat under any circumstances, but this one is being he's do you want to see him, Jamie? I appreciate this is an ultimate visual media. He's escaped. He was about to attack your face because you are an interesting purple object on the screen. But you can I'll just tilt my camera.
I can see him there. Oh, the chonkers.
He's being very chunky. He's 1 year old very soon.
Oh, he's getting in that lamp.
He is.
What's in that lamp? There's something in there.
That's his toy, actually. That's like a toy box thing that he is about to pull off a shelf.
Yay!
So I think I've got noise cancelling on, but we are going to end this podcast.
Let's
sound
outro.
Of my cat destroying the room behind me.
Let's outro ourselves.
Yes, let's do it. That is, he's left now. His business here is done. I appreciate. It started with a visual bit, ended with a visual bit. Just imagine a cat. All right, put a picture of the show notes.
Imagine the purplest face.
Imagine, yeah, you have become steadily more purple over the course.
I have. This. I look like a fucking beet.
No,
I look like a beet with glasses.
You look. Yeah, no, like there's.
Look at you trying not to agree with me.
No,
I look
you
like
do.
a beet.
You do. Look, all right. I just just reporting nice from beet. The Ribena dimension. It's Jamie Britton.
Gentlemen, get those faces up.
Yes, you have actually entered a kind of like picture-in-picture Command and Conquer FMV guy.
Yeah.
Space now, like the game of uplighting and the
fire the blackberries.
Yeah, exactly. Current and conquer. I don't know. There's something here. What were we
outro.
About? Yeah, command and cordial. I don't know. There's something.
Command and cordial. That's very good.
Yeah. I'm afraid. I think you might have just like mind wiped me with the "What if RFK Jr. was a Resident Evil character" thing, because
he's so perfect for one.
That's a Wesker right there. Gotta say. Anyway.
Classic Wesker, right?
Yeah, just kicking a door in.
To be honest, at this point, if it turned out that RFK had escaped from the video game dimension, I'd probably be relieved, to be honest.
Just Nemesis battering a door down, hissing like, "Oh, this isn't real." Anyway, fucking hell.
Outro.
That's all the podcasts we've got time for. If you would like, you can listen to more of them. You can find them on our website at crateandcrowbar.com and upload it to YouTube at youtube.com/crateandcrowbar, and all sorts of other places where podcasts may or may not be. Thank you to each and every one of our Patreon supporters who enabled this to happen over and over again. If you'd like to find out more about supporting the podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. That's it. I have been Chris Thurston.
I have been Jamie Beetroot Britton.
I will say, you've actually entered into more of a kind of marathon purple filter of everything.
Absolutely, yeah.
Particularly because my connection's not great, so you have kind of pixelated a little bit. Like, I think you can style this out. I think you can get back from Blackcurrant Commander to
like, which one is the chin I need to look at? Which is the chin I need to click on? One of those chins is real.
I think that's it, podcast-wise, isn't it? Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Is that you, Claire?
You know, I am on a carnivore diet, so I just eat meat and ferments, and I'm very happy with that, so I'm going to probably have yogurt and,
Oh, man. What happened?
It kills the weeds at every stage of their life. It identifies their species and kills them instantly, all the way down through their root system by exploding them with this laser.